Most people do not realize how much effort they spend trying to control their lives. They try to control outcomes. They try to control other people's reactions. They try to control time, emotions, circumstances, even their own thoughts. And yet, the more they try, the more restless they feel. At first, control feels like safety. It feels responsible. It feels mature. You plan carefully. You anticipate problems. You prepare for every possible scenario. But quietly, something else begins to grow beneath that effort. Tension, a subtle tightness in the chest, a constant sense that something might go wrong, a feeling that you can never fully rest. Because when you believe peace depends on control, you can never stop controlling. Life becomes a task that must be managed. Every moment becomes a problem to solve. Every uncertainty feels like a threat. You wake up already calculating. You fall asleep replaying what you should have done differently. And even when things go well, the peace never lasts. Because deep inside, you know it could all change again. So you tighten your grip. You try harder. You think more. You plan further ahead. But the mind was never designed to carry the weight of life itself. The mind can plan, but it cannot command reality. The moment you confuse preparation with control, suffering quietly begins. You may not call it suffering. You may call it stress, anxiety, overthinking, burnout. But at its root, it is the same movement, resistance to what is. Life does not unfold according to our expectations. Bodies age. People change. Plans collapse. Moments pass without asking permission. And the more we argue with this truth, the more exhausted we become. Not because life is cruel, but because we are asking it to obey us. This is why peace feels so distant for so many people. They are searching for calm in the future, in better conditions, in more certainty. They tell themselves, once things settle down, I'll be at peace. Once I fix this, I'll relax. Once I understand everything, I'll feel safe. But peace does not arrive through control. It arrives through release. This does not mean giving up on life. It does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means seeing clearly the limit of what can be controlled. It means understanding that much of your suffering is not caused by what happens, but by your demand that it should not have happened. When you stop trying to force life into your expectations, something surprising occurs. The body softens. The breath deepens. The mind becomes quieter. Not because problems disappear, but because resistance does. And in that space where resistance fades, peace naturally appears. Not as excitement, not as pleasure, but as a quiet steadiness that does not depend on circumstances. This teaching is not dramatic. It is not comforting to the ego, but it is deeply freeing. Peace comes when you stop trying to control life, not when life finally obeys you, but when you stop asking it to. Why humans are obsessed with control. From a very young age, we are taught, quietly and repeatedly, that control equals safety. We are praised for planning ahead, for being prepared, for managing risks. We are told that successful people take control of their lives, that strong people stay on top of things, that wisdom means predicting what will happen next. Over time, this idea becomes deeply rooted. If something feels uncertain, we try to fix it. If something feels uncomfortable, we try to manage it. If something feels unpredictable, we try to control it. And at first, this seems reasonable. After all, planning helps us survive. Structure helps societies function. Discipline allows skills to grow. But somewhere along the way, a subtle shift occurs. Control stops being a tool and becomes an identity. We do not just plan our actions. We begin to demand certainty from life itself. We want guarantees. We want reassurance that things will work out, that people will behave as expected, that effort will always be rewarded. And when life fails to provide these guarantees, fear appears. This fear does not always feel dramatic. Often, it feels practical. What if this goes wrong? What if I lose this? What if I make the wrong choice? So the mind responds by tightening its grip. It thinks more, plans more, replays conversations, imagines future scenarios again and again. This is how control disguises itself as responsibility. But beneath this constant mental activity is something much older and deeper: the fear of uncertainty. Human beings crave predictability because uncertainty reminds us of our vulnerability. We do not know how long we will live. We do not know when loss will arrive. We do not know how quickly everything can change. Rather than facing this truth directly, the mind tries to escape it. Control becomes a way to avoid feeling exposed. If I stay alert enough, nothing bad will happen. If I think far enough ahead, I won't be surprised. If I manage everything correctly, I won't suffer. But life does not work this way. No amount of thinking can eliminate uncertainty. No amount of control can guarantee outcomes. And yet, the mind keeps trying. This creates a constant internal tension, a sense of being on guard, a feeling that rest must be earned, a belief that letting go is dangerous. Over time, this tension becomes normal. People forget what ease feels like. They forget what it means to be present without managing the moment. They confuse stillness with laziness, acceptance with weakness, letting go with failure. But this obsession with control has consequences. The body remains in a state of subtle stress. The nervous system rarely relaxes. The mind rarely settles. Even during moments that should feel peaceful, there is an underlying vigilance, a quiet question running in the background. What's next? This is why many people feel tired, even when nothing is physically demanding. Their exhaustion does not come from action. It comes from constant mental resistance. They are fighting reality moment by moment, trying to shape it, trying to predict it, trying to hold it still. But reality is not something that can be held. It moves. It changes. It unfolds according to causes far beyond individual control. The deeper problem is not that people want control. The deeper problem is that they believe peace depends on it. They believe that once everything is stable, calm will finally arrive. But stability is temporary. Certainty is fragile. And control is always incomplete. So peace keeps being postponed, always just one condition away. This is the cycle that quietly governs modern life. Control leads to tension. Tension leads to fatigue. Fatigue leads to frustration. And yet, instead of questioning the need for control, people often double down. They try harder, think faster, plan further ahead, not realizing that the very effort meant to protect them is the source of their unrest. To understand peace, this pattern must first be seen clearly, not judged, not condemned, simply observed. Only then can a different relationship with life begin. Control is born from fear, not strength. Control is often mistaken for strength. From the outside, it looks disciplined, decisive, capable. But if you observe it closely, you will see that control does not arise from confidence. It arises from fear. Not loud fear, not panic. A quiet, persistent fear that something might go wrong. This fear does not announce itself. It hides behind logic, behind planning, behind responsibility. It says, I just want to be prepared. I just don't want to be careless. I'm only trying to prevent problems. But beneath these reasonable explanations is a deeper movement, the fear of losing ground, the fear of being exposed, the fear of not knowing what comes next. True strength is comfortable with uncertainty. Control is not. Control needs assurance. It needs predictability. It needs the future to behave. When the future does not cooperate, the mind tightens. It begins to monitor everything more closely. It scans for signs. It interprets neutral events as warnings. A delayed message becomes a concern. A change in tone becomes a problem. A minor setback becomes a threat. This is not awareness. It is vigilance driven by fear. And the more fearful the mind becomes, the more control it demands. This is why control never brings peace. It feeds on the very anxiety it tries to eliminate. Fear creates the desire to control. Control reinforces fear. A closed loop with no natural end. Many people believe they control because they are strong enough to handle life. In truth, they control because they are afraid to feel vulnerable. Vulnerability means admitting that life cannot be fully managed, that outcomes are uncertain, that loss is possible. The mind finds this unbearable, so it creates an illusion of command. If I stay alert, I won't be hurt. If I keep things organized, I'll be safe. If I understand everything, I won't be surprised. But no amount of understanding prevents change. No amount of preparation prevents loss. Control does not eliminate uncertainty. It only delays acknowledging it. This is why moments of loss often feel so overwhelming, not because loss itself is unbearable, but because the illusion of control collapses. When control fails, fear rushes in unchecked. People then say, I've lost control. But control was never truly there, only the belief in it. Fear also explains why letting go feels so threatening. Letting go does not mean chaos, but to a fearful mind, It feels like surrendering safety. The mind imagines worst-case scenarios. If I don't control this, everything will fall apart. If I stop worrying, something bad will happen. If I relax, I'll regret it. These thoughts are not wisdom. They are fear speaking in a rational tone. A calm mind does not need to grip life tightly. A fearful mind does. Strength does not come from forcing reality into shape. It comes from meeting reality as it is. But fear prefers effort over honesty. It would rather exhaust itself than admit uncertainty. So people stay tense. They stay busy. They stay mentally active. Because activity feels safer than stillness. Stillness exposes what control tries to hide. The truth that life moves on its own. This does not mean humans should act carelessly or abandon responsibility. There's a difference between responding wisely and controlling obsessively. Response comes from clarity. Control comes from fear. Response adapts. Control resists. Response listens to the present moment. Control argues with it. Fear-driven control also distorts perception. It narrows attention. The mind focuses only on potential threats, ignoring what is stable and sufficient. People stop noticing what is working. They stop feeling gratitude. They stop sensing ease. Because fear is always looking ahead, always preparing for a future that may never arrive. This creates a strange paradox. The more people try to secure peace through control, the less peace they experience. Because peace requires openness, and fear demands closure. Peace allows uncertainty. Fear cannot tolerate it. This is why peace feels fragile to someone who controls. They may experience brief moments of calm when things go according to plan. But the calm collapses the moment something unexpected occurs. True peace is not built on conditions. It does not require guarantees. It does not depend on outcomes. It rests in trust, not blind trust, but trust in the nature of change itself. Fear resists change. Peace understands it. To move beyond control, fear must be seen clearly, not pushed away, not judged, seen as a natural response to uncertainty, but not a guide to truth. When fear is no longer obeyed, control loosens naturally, not through effort, but through understanding. This understanding is the beginning of freedom. The more you control, the more restless the mind becomes. At first, control appears to calm the mind. When you make a plan, there is a brief sense of relief. When you organize things, anxiety seems to decrease. When you decide what should happen next, uncertainty feels manageable. But this calm is temporary, because control does not remove uncertainty. It only distracts the mind from it. Very quickly, the mind demands more planning, more checking, more certainty. And so the cycle begins. You plan to feel safe, but then you worry about whether the plan will work. So you revise it. Then you worry about what you missed. Each attempt to control creates new questions. What if this fails? What if something changes? What if I made the wrong choice? Instead of settling, the mind becomes busier. Control multiplies thought. This is why people who try hardest to manage their lives often feel the most mentally exhausted. Their minds never rest. Even when nothing is happening externally, something is always moving internally, replaying, predicting, correcting, anticipating. This constant movement creates restlessness, not obvious agitation, but a subtle inability to be fully present. The mind is always leaning forward into the future. Even during moments of stillness, it asks, "What should I be doing next? What am I forgetting? What could go wrong?" This restlessness is not caused by life itself. It is caused by resistance to life's uncertainty. The more you try to hold life still, the more friction you create within yourself. Imagine trying to stop a river with your hands. The water does not become calmer. Your arms become tired. Control works the same way. Life continues to move, but the effort to restrain it drains your energy. This is why restlessness often increases during periods when people feel they should be calm. Vacations, quiet evenings, moments without obligations. Instead of relaxing, the mind becomes uneasy. Because without tasks to manage, control has nothing to cling to. The mind then invents problems. It worries about the future. It revisits the past. It creates scenarios. Restlessness is control searching for something to grip. Another effect of control is fragmentation. The mind divides life into problems and solutions. Nothing is simply allowed to be. A moment is not just a moment. It is something to be optimized, improved, or secured. People stop experiencing life directly. They experience it through evaluation. Is this enough? Is this right? Is this safe? This constant assessment prevents ease, because ease requires trust. And control does not trust. Control assumes something is always wrong or about to be wrong, so it stays alert. Over time, this alertness becomes the background state of the mind. Even joy feels unstable. People enjoy things cautiously. They relax partially. They hold happiness with one eye open, because control whispers, "Don't get too comfortable. This won't last. Be prepared." This does not protect joy. It diminishes it. The mind never fully settles into the present moment. It hovers above it, ready to intervene. This hovering is exhausting. And yet, many people believe restlessness means they are not controlling enough. So they try harder. They tighten schedules. They analyze more deeply. They search for better systems. But restlessness does not come from lack of control. It comes from too much of it. A mind at peace does not constantly monitor itself. It does not question every sensation. It allows thoughts to arise and pass without interference. Control interrupts this natural flow. It grabs thoughts, follows them, attempts to resolve them, and each attempt creates more thought. This is why meditation feels difficult for those who strongly identify with control. Sitting still feels unbearable, not because stillness is painful, but because control has nothing to do. Without something to manage, it becomes exposed. So the mind grows restless. It seeks distraction. It seeks stimulation. It seeks movement. But restlessness is not solved by movement. It is solved by release. Release does not mean suppressing thought. It means no longer trying to dominate it. The mind settles when it is no longer being forced, just as water becomes clear when left undisturbed. Control keeps stirring. Peace requires allowing. The more you see how control fuels restlessness, the less convincing control becomes. You begin to notice that every attempt to fix inner unease only intensifies it. And this insight marks an important shift. You stop trying to calm the mind through effort. You begin to understand that calm appears when effort ends, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, as resistance softens, as grip loosens, as life is allowed to move without interference. The illusion that, if everything goes right, I will be at peace. One of the most persistent beliefs the mind carries is this: if everything goes according to plan, I will finally be at peace. It sounds reasonable, even wise. After all, who wouldn't feel calm if problems disappeared, relationships were stable, and the future looked secure? So the mind sets a condition. Peace will come later. After this is resolved. After that is fixed. After things settle down. This belief quietly governs how people live. They tolerate tension today for the promise of peace tomorrow. They endure stress now in exchange for a future moment of relief. But tomorrow keeps moving. As soon as one issue is resolved, another appears. A goal is reached, and a new one replaces it. A problem is solved, and a different concern takes its place. Life does not pause to allow peace to arrive. This reveals the illusion. Peace is being treated as a reward, something earned through effort, control, and success. But peace does not function this way. When peace is conditional, it becomes fragile. It depends on circumstances behaving correctly, on people meeting expectations, on outcomes aligning with desire. The moment something deviates, peace collapses. This is why people often feel strangely empty after achieving what they worked so hard for. They expected relief. They expected completion. Instead, they feel restless again, because the mind immediately identifies the next thing that must be controlled. If I just maintain this, if I can keep things from changing, if nothing disrupts this, but nothing remains fixed. Conditions shift. Bodies age. Situations evolve. Peace built on conditions cannot survive change. The illusion deepens when people equate peace with comfort. They believe peace means the absence of discomfort, uncertainty, or challenge. So they work tirelessly to eliminate anything that feels unpleasant. They avoid difficult conversations. They resist uncertainty. They try to smooth out every rough edge of life. But discomfort is not the enemy of peace. Resistance is. When discomfort is resisted, it multiplies. When it is allowed, it passes. This is not a philosophical idea. It is observable. A physical sensation becomes unbearable only when the mind fights it. An emotion becomes overwhelming only when it is rejected. The same applies to life situations. A change becomes suffering when it is denied. An ending becomes painful when it is resisted. The belief that peace comes after control keeps people in a constant state of preparation. They are always almost there, almost calm, almost settled, almost at peace, but never fully present, because presence feels risky. Presence means meeting reality as it is, not as planned, and the controlling mind does not trust the present moment. It trusts only the imagined future where everything behaves, but that future never arrives. This belief also creates judgment. People judge themselves for not being peaceful yet. They think something is wrong with them. Why can't I relax? Why am I still anxious? Why am I not calm even though things are fine? They do not see that peace is being postponed by design. As long as peace is tied to conditions, it must remain out of reach. Peace is not the absence of disturbance. It is the absence of resistance. This does not mean that challenges disappear. It means they no longer determine your inner state. A peaceful mind does not demand that life be orderly. It understands that disorder is part of movement. A peaceful mind does not require certainty. It accepts not knowing. This acceptance is often misunderstood. People think acceptance means approval. It does not. Acceptance means seeing clearly without arguing. It means acknowledging what is happening without insisting it should be different. The illusion collapses when this is seen directly. You realize that peace was never missing from the future. It was being blocked in the present, blocked by the demand that life conform. The moment that demand softens, peace appears, not as excitement, not as pleasure, but as steadiness. A quiet steadiness that does not depend on things going right. This steadiness is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels ordinary, and that is why it is often overlooked. People expect peace to feel special. They expect a release, a high, a resolution. Instead, peace feels like nothing being pushed. Nothing being pulled, nothing being forced, just this moment, allowed. When this is understood, the pursuit of perfect conditions loses its urgency. You still act, you still respond, you still make choices, but you no longer postpone peace until life behaves. You stop bargaining with reality, and in that stopping, peace quietly remains. When life refuses to follow your plan, no matter how carefully life is planned, there comes a moment when it refuses to cooperate. Something unexpected happens. A relationship changes. A plan collapses. An outcome turns in a direction you did not prepare for. At first, the reaction is often disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. This doesn't make sense. I did everything right. The mind searches for explanations. It replays decisions. It looks for mistakes. It asks what could have been controlled better. This is the moment when control reveals its weakness. Because control depends on the assumption that effort guarantees results. When life contradicts that assumption, frustration appears. Not simply disappointment, but a deeper sense of injustice. People feel betrayed by life itself. They think peace was promised in exchange for effort. But life never made such a promise. This is where suffering intensifies. Not because of what happened, but because the mind refuses to accept that it happened. The resistance becomes personal. Why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? The mind scrambles to regain control. It tries to force meaning. It demands resolution. It looks for a way back to certainty. But often, there is no way back. Life has moved forward. The more the mind resists this movement, the more painful it feels. This resistance can take many forms: anger, blame, regret, obsessive thinking, even numbness. All are attempts to avoid facing the same truth: that life does not follow personal plans. This realization feels threatening because it exposes vulnerability. It reveals that security was never guaranteed, that control was conditional, that effort does not protect against change. For many people, this is when exhaustion sets in. They realize they cannot hold everything together anymore. But instead of letting go, they often tighten further. They become rigid. They insist that things must return to how they were. They cling to an image of how life should look. This clinging prolongs suffering, because life does not reverse itself to accommodate expectations. It moves. It continues. And the choice is not whether life will change, but whether the mind will move with it or resist it. Resistance does not stop change. It only creates pain. This is why moments of loss, failure, or disruption feel so heavy. Not because they are inherently unbearable, but because they collide directly with the desire for control. When plans fall apart, the illusion of control falls with them, and in that collapse, fear rushes in. But there is another possibility in these moments, one that is rarely discussed. When control fails, something else becomes visible. Space. A space where the mind can no longer pretend to manage everything. A space where effort reaches its limit. At first, this space feels uncomfortable, even frightening, because the mind is used to filling every gap with planning and resistance. But if this space is not immediately filled, something unexpected happens. The struggle softens. The body begins to relax, not because the situation is resolved, but because the fight against it stops. This is often mistaken for giving up, but it is not. Giving up is passive and hopeless. Letting go is alert and honest. It is the recognition that reality cannot be forced. This recognition is not intellectual. It is felt as a release of tension, felt as a shift from "why is this happening?" to "this is happening." The difference seems small, but it changes everything. When life refuses to follow your plan, it is not punishing you. It is revealing the limits of control. And within those limits lies the possibility of peace. Not peace as comfort, not peace as success, but peace as non-resistance. This peace does not require understanding everything. It does not require fixing the future. It simply requires honesty with the present. This is why some people discover a deeper calm only after things fall apart. Not because suffering is good, but because resistance finally ends. When there is nothing left to control, control loses its power. And in that moment, life is no longer an enemy to manage. It becomes a process to participate in. This shift does not erase pain, but it prevents pain from turning into endless struggle. Life will still move in unpredictable ways, but the mind no longer demands obedience, and when that demand dissolves, peace becomes possible. Not because life followed your plan, but because you stopped insisting that it should. Why letting go is not failure. For many people, the idea of letting go feels uncomfortable. It sounds passive, weak, like giving up. From an early age, we are taught the opposite. Hold on, push through, don't quit. So when control begins to fail, the mind resists letting go. It believes that releasing control means abandoning responsibility, that acceptance means surrendering ambition, that not fighting means losing. But letting go is none of these things. Letting go is not the absence of care. It is the absence of resistance. Failure happens when effort is exhausted and clarity is lost. Letting go happens when effort is exhausted and clarity appears. The two feel similar from the outside, but internally they are very different. Failure is heavy. Letting go is light. Failure collapses into despair. Letting go opens into understanding. The confusion comes from equating effort with wisdom. People assume that if they stop forcing, they stop living fully. But forcing and living are not the same. Forcing comes from fear. Living comes from awareness. Letting go does not mean stopping action. It means stopping the demand that action guarantees outcomes. You can still act. You can still choose. You can still respond. But you no longer attach your peace to results. This distinction is subtle but essential. Most suffering comes not from action itself, but from clinging to what action should produce. When outcomes do not match expectations, disappointment arises, and disappointment hardens into resistance. Letting go interrupts this process. It allows action to remain, while attachment dissolves. This is why letting go often feels like relief. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, the mind quiets. Not because problems disappear, but because the inner struggle ends. This relief is often misunderstood. People think it means they no longer care. But care without control is not indifference. It is clarity. You still do what needs to be done. But you stop arguing with reality when it responds differently. This is not weakness. Weakness insists on controlling what cannot be controlled. Strength recognizes limits without resentment. Letting go also requires humility. It means admitting that life does not belong to personal will. That intelligence, larger than individual planning, is always at work. This recognition softens the ego. The need to dominate outcomes fades, and with it, the exhaustion of constant vigilance. Letting go does not mean trusting blindly. It means trusting the process of change. Understanding that everything arises and passes according to conditions. This understanding removes personal blame. When something ends, it is not because you failed. When something shifts, it is not because you lost control. It is because conditions changed. Seeing this clearly prevents unnecessary self-judgment. Many people punish themselves for not maintaining control. They think peace should be earned through effort. But peace is not a reward. It is the natural state that appears when resistance dissolves. Letting go reveals this state. It does not create it. This is why letting go often feels like coming home. Not to something new, but to something familiar that was covered by effort. There is also fear around letting go because it exposes uncertainty. Without control, the future feels open. But openness is not danger. It is possibility. Control narrows life into manageable shapes. Letting go allows life to unfold. The mind resists this unfolding because it cannot predict it. But peace does not come from prediction. It comes from presence. When you let go, you meet each moment as it arrives, not armed with expectations, but with attention. This attention is flexible. It responds instead of resists. This is why letting go is often followed by more appropriate action, not less. Actions become simpler, more precise, less driven by panic, because they are no longer fueled by fear. Letting go also dissolves the idea of personal failure. Life is not a project to complete perfectly. It is a process to participate in. Sometimes things work. Sometimes they do not. Neither defines your worth. When this is seen, the burden of constant self-evaluation lifts. You stop measuring life by how well you controlled it. You start experiencing it directly. This is the freedom hidden inside letting go. Not escape, not collapse, but a shift from force to flow, from tension to clarity, from struggle to understanding. And in this understanding, peace is no longer something you chase. It is something that remains. The difference between wise action and attachment. One of the greatest misunderstandings about letting go is the belief that it leads to passivity. People hear "stop controlling" and assume it means doing nothing. They imagine withdrawal, indifference, or apathy. This misunderstanding keeps many trapped in attachment. They believe the only alternatives are control or collapse. But there is a third way. Wise action. Wise action looks similar to control on the surface. Both involve effort. Both involve decision-making. But internally, they are completely different. Control is driven by attachment. Wise action is guided by clarity. Attachment demands a specific outcome. Wise action responds to the present conditions. Attachment says, "This must work." Wise action says, "This is what can be done now." This difference is subtle but transformative. When attachment is present, action is tense. The mind is already leaning into the future, already judging success or failure, already anxious about results. When clarity is present, action is calm. Attention is fully with what is being done, not with what should happen afterward. This calm is often mistaken for lack of ambition. But ambition rooted in attachment is different from intention rooted in awareness. Attachment-driven ambition is restless. It is never satisfied. It always wants confirmation. Awareness-driven intention is steady. It does not need reassurance. It does what is appropriate and lets go. This is why wise action feels lighter. There is effort, but no strain. There is movement, but no inner resistance. Control tightens the mind around action. Wise action leaves the mind open. Another key difference lies in how failure is experienced. When action is driven by attachment, failure feels personal. It threatens identity. It creates shame. It fuels self-criticism. When action is guided by clarity, failure is information. It reveals conditions. It shows what did not align. It invites adjustment, not punishment. This does not make failure pleasant, but it prevents it from becoming suffering. Attachment turns outcomes into judgments about the self. Wise action sees outcomes as part of a process. This perspective changes everything. You stop acting to secure peace. You act because action is needed. Peace is no longer a future prize. It is present in the way action is taken. Another distinction becomes clear in relationships. Attachment tries to control others. It wants reassurance. It wants consistency. It wants predictability. Wise action listens. It responds to what is actually being expressed, not what is expected. Attachment hears selectively. Wise action hears fully. This is why attachment leads to conflict. It does not meet people as they are. It meets them as they should be. Wise action meets reality without demand, not because it approves of everything, but because it sees clearly. Seeing clearly allows appropriate response. Demanding blinds. This same principle applies internally. Attachment tries to control thoughts and emotions. It suppresses. It judges. It resists. Wise action observes. It notices patterns. It allows emotions to arise and pass. It responds when response is needed. This observation is not passive. It requires attention, but it does not interfere unnecessarily. The mind learns to trust its own capacity to respond, without micromanagement. This trust is essential. Control does not trust life. Wise action does, not because life is predictable, but because awareness is adaptable. When awareness is present, the need to control diminishes. You no longer feel the urge to dominate outcomes. You focus on what is possible now. This is why wise action feels grounded. It does not rush. It does not hesitate. It moves with circumstances. Attachment is always late or early. Late because it resists change. Early because it anticipates problems. Wise action is timely. It happens when conditions are ready. This timing cannot be forced. It emerges from attention. Many people fear that without attachment, they will lose motivation. But attachment does not create true motivation. It creates pressure. Pressure exhausts. Clarity sustains. When action arises from clarity, energy is conserved. Effort is used efficiently. There is less internal conflict. This is why people who let go often become more effective, not less. Their actions are no longer scattered by fear. They are focused, direct, appropriate. The confusion comes from equating intensity with commitment. Attachment is intense. Wise action is consistent. Intensity burns quickly. Consistency endures. This endurance is not dramatic. It is quiet. It does not seek recognition. It simply continues responding to what is. When this distinction is understood, letting go no longer feels threatening. You realize you are not abandoning action. You are abandoning unnecessary struggle. You are not losing direction. You are losing friction. Action continues, but it is no longer burdened by the need to control life. And in that freedom, peace naturally accompanies movement, not as a reward, but as a quality of how life is lived. When you stop resisting the present moment, most inner conflict does not come from what is happening. It comes from the refusal to allow what is happening. Resistance is subtle. It does not always appear as anger or rejection. Often, it appears as tension, a tightening in the body, a mental argument, a quiet wish that the moment were different. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't right. I need this to change. These thoughts feel natural, but they mark the beginning of struggle. The present moment is already here. Resisting it does not remove it. It only adds friction. This friction is experienced as stress, irritation, and fatigue. The mind believes resistance is protective. It thinks that by opposing reality, it is fixing it. But reality does not respond to opposition. It responds to understanding. When resistance is present, attention is divided. Part of the mind is in the moment. Another part is fighting it. This division creates unease. You're never fully where you are. Even pleasant moments become fragile. The mind worries they will end. It tries to hold them. Unpleasant moments feel unbearable. The mind tries to escape them. In both cases, resistance interferes with direct experience. Stopping resistance does not mean liking everything that happens. It means acknowledging what is happening without inner argument. This acknowledgement is often mistaken for resignation. But resignation is heavy. Acceptance is clear. Resignation says, "There is nothing I can do." Acceptance says, "This is what is happening." One closes, the other opens. When resistance stops, the body responds immediately. Breathing deepens. Muscles soften. The nervous system settles, not because the situation changed, but because the fight ended. This physical shift reveals something important. Much of what is called stress is self-created. It is the body reacting to mental opposition. When the mind stops insisting, the body stops bracing. This is why peace feels like relief. Not excitement, not pleasure. Relief. The relief of no longer pushing against life. The present moment does not require agreement. It only requires recognition. This recognition is simple, but not easy. The habit of resistance is deeply ingrained. The mind is trained to judge, fix, and improve. So when resistance stops, the mind feels exposed. It fears passivity. It fears being overwhelmed. But the present moment is not an enemy. It is a flow of sensations, thoughts, and events. When allowed, it moves. When resisted, it feels stuck. This is especially clear with emotions. An emotion arises. The mind labels it as bad, unwanted, dangerous. Resistance appears. The emotion intensifies. It lingers longer than necessary. But when the emotion is allowed, Without judgment, it changes. It may still be uncomfortable, but it is no longer overwhelming. The same applies to life situations. A delay is uncomfortable. A loss is painful. A change is unsettling. But resistance adds an extra layer of suffering. When you stop resisting the present moment, something unexpected happens. Clarity appears. You begin to see what is actually required. Not what should have happened, but what can be done now. Resistance blocks this clarity. It keeps the mind focused on alternatives that no longer exist. Acceptance brings attention back to what is available. This is why acceptance is not passive. It is the foundation of effective response. You cannot respond wisely to a moment you refuse to see. Stopping resistance also changes your relationship with time. The mind stops rushing ahead. It stops replaying what cannot be changed. Attention returns to now, and in this return, peace becomes accessible. Not because now is perfect, but because now is not being fought. This peace is stable. It does not depend on comfort. It is present even in difficulty, because difficulty without resistance is manageable. Difficulty with resistance becomes suffering. This distinction is crucial. Life will always contain challenge. Peace is not the elimination of challenge. It is the end of unnecessary struggle. When you stop resisting the present moment, you stop demanding that life justify itself. You stop asking, "Why me?" You stop insisting on explanation. You begin to meet experience directly. This directness is freeing. It removes the extra layer of interpretation that drains energy. You begin to trust that you can handle what arises, not because you control it, but because awareness is already here. This trust is quiet. It does not make promises. It simply stays. And in staying, it allows peace to emerge, not as something added to life, but as what remains when resistance is gone. Freedom comes from seeing clearly, not from controlling. Many people believe freedom is something to be achieved. They imagine it as a future state, a time when obligations disappear, when uncertainty is resolved, when life finally becomes manageable. So they work toward freedom the same way they work toward security. They plan. They organize. They control. But freedom does not emerge from control. Control narrows life. Freedom opens it. The confusion comes from mistaking clarity for dominance. People assume that if they understand everything, if they anticipate every outcome, if they stay ahead of change, they will feel free. In reality, this effort creates the opposite. The more you try to manage life, the more confined you feel. Because control requires constant attention. It demands monitoring, correction, adjustment. There is no rest in control. Freedom does not come from having power over circumstances. It comes from seeing circumstances as they are. Seeing clearly does not mean understanding every detail. It means recognizing what is within your influence and what is not. Most suffering arises from confusing the two. People spend enormous energy trying to influence what cannot be influenced. They try to control how others feel. They try to control the timing of change. They try to control outcomes that depend on countless conditions. This effort creates tension. not because the effort fails, but because it was misplaced. Clarity reveals limits, and limits are not a problem. They are information. When limits are ignored, effort becomes wasteful. When limits are respected, effort becomes effective. This is why clarity feels liberating. It removes unnecessary struggle. Instead of fighting reality, you work with it. Instead of demanding certainty, you respond to what is present. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is the absence of illusion. The illusion that life should obey personal expectations. When this illusion dissolves, energy is released, not outwardly, inwardly. The mind stops arguing. The body stops bracing. Attention becomes available. This availability is freedom. It allows you to meet life without defensive posture. You no longer approach each moment as a threat to be managed. You approach it as a process unfolding. This does not make life predictable. It makes you flexible. Flexibility is more powerful than control. Control breaks when conditions change. Flexibility adapts. This adaptability is often misunderstood as weakness, but weakness resists change. Strength moves with it. Seeing clearly also changes how you relate to desire. Desire is no longer treated as a command. It is seen as a movement. It arises. It passes. When desire is seen clearly, it loses its authority. You do not suppress it. You do not obey it. You observe it. This observation creates space, and in that space, choice appears. Control tries to eliminate desire. Clarity understands it. The same is true for fear. Fear does not disappear through control. It disappears through understanding. When fear is seen clearly, it is no longer mistaken for truth. It becomes a signal, not a directive. This shifts how decisions are made. You stop reacting reflexively. You start responding intelligently. Freedom is not about avoiding difficulty. It is about not being imprisoned by it. A clear mind can face difficulty without being consumed. A controlling mind becomes trapped by every challenge because it insists on resolution before acceptance. Clarity reverses this order. It accepts first, then responds. This acceptance is not passive. It is accurate. It sees what is, and from that seeing, appropriate action arises naturally. No force required. This is why freedom feels calm. Not because nothing is happening, but because nothing is being resisted. You are no longer pushing against the current. You are navigating it. This navigation does not require certainty. It requires attention. Attention replaces control. Where attention is present, control becomes unnecessary. You trust your capacity to respond, not because you know what will happen, but because awareness is already functioning. This trust is subtle. It does not announce itself, but it changes how life is lived. Moments are met directly. Decisions are made without inner conflict. Outcomes are accepted without collapse. Freedom is not found at the end of effort. It is found at the end of illusion. The illusion that peace depends on domination. The illusion that safety comes from force. The illusion that clarity must be imposed. When these illusions dissolve, freedom remains quiet, unremarkable, stable, not because life is under control, but because it no longer needs to be. Why wanting more keeps you restless. Wanting more is rarely questioned. It is often celebrated, encouraged, presented as ambition, growth, or motivation. But beneath this constant wanting lies a subtle unease. Wanting is a movement away from the present moment. It says, "This is not enough. This should be different. There is something missing." Even when life is relatively stable, the mind searches for improvement, a better outcome, a better version of yourself, a better future. This search creates tension, not dramatic tension, a quiet dissatisfaction that never fully resolves, because the object of wanting keeps changing. You want something, you get it. Brief satisfaction arises. Then the mind moves on. What's next? What else? How can this be improved? The cycle repeats. Wanting does not end with fulfillment. It feeds on it. This is why people often feel restless even when they achieve what they once desired. They expected contentment. They found movement instead. Wanting is not the problem. Attachment to wanting is. When desire is believed to be the path to peace, peace becomes unreachable. Because desire always points forward, peace lives here. The mind that is always reaching cannot rest. It is always leaning toward a future that promises satisfaction. But that satisfaction is temporary, because the mind quickly adjusts. What was once enough becomes ordinary. What was once exciting becomes expected. So wanting intensifies. More effort, more comparison, more striving. Comparison is a natural extension of wanting. When the mind wants more, it measures itself against others. It looks outward. Who has more? Who is ahead? Who is behind? This comparison fuels dissatisfaction. Even when things are going well, the mind finds reasons to feel lacking. This is not because something is wrong with life. It is because wanting distorts perception. It narrows attention to what is missing. It overlooks what is present. This narrowing creates restlessness. The mind cannot settle when it is focused on absence. Even pleasure becomes unstable. Enjoyment is interrupted by anticipation. How long will this last? What comes after this? Wanting never allows full presence. It turns experience into a stepping stone, something to move through rather than inhabit. This is why stillness feels uncomfortable for a wanting mind. Stillness offers no progress, no acquisition, no movement. So the mind resists it. It invents goals. It creates projects. It searches for stimulation. This activity feels productive, but internally it maintains agitation. Wanting also disguises itself as self-improvement. The mind tells itself it wants to become better, more disciplined, more successful, more peaceful. But when improvement is driven by dissatisfaction, it reinforces the belief that the present self is inadequate. This belief creates tension. Growth motivated by clarity is different from growth motivated by lack. Clarity sees what can be refined without self-rejection. Lack demands change to justify worth. The latter never rests. This is why people often feel they are never enough. No matter how much they accomplish, no matter how much they improve, the standard keeps shifting. Because wanting has no end point, Peace is postponed indefinitely. It is always one achievement away. This postponement becomes exhausting. The mind is always preparing for a future that never arrives. Restlessness is the result. Not because life demands too much, but because the mind demands satisfaction from movement. When wanting is observed clearly, something changes. You begin to notice its repetitive nature. The same pattern, the same promises, the same disappointment. This observation weakens its grip. You stop assuming that fulfillment lies ahead. You begin to notice moments of ease that were previously overlooked, moments when nothing is missing. These moments are quiet. They do not announce themselves. They appear when wanting pauses, even briefly. In that pause, the mind experiences contentment without acquisition. This contentment is fragile when unrecognized, but when noticed, it grows stable. You realize peace does not require eliminating desire. It requires seeing desire clearly. Desire loses its authority when it is no longer believed to deliver peace. You still want, but you do not obey blindly. You respond intelligently. You choose rather than chase. This shifts your relationship with life. You stop measuring moments by what they lead to. You experience them as complete. This does not remove ambition. It removes desperation. Action continues, but restlessness fades. Because peace is no longer postponed. It is no longer tied to outcomes. It becomes available now, not as excitement, but as enoughness. The enoughness of not needing more to feel whole. Letting go of control without losing awareness. One of the deepest fears around letting go is the fear of becoming careless. People worry that without control, they will drift, that they will lose discipline, that awareness will fade. This fear comes from confusing control with consciousness. Control is forceful. Awareness is attentive. They are not the same. In fact, excessive control often reduces awareness. When the mind is busy managing outcomes, it overlooks what is actually happening. It reacts instead of seeing. Awareness does not need control to function. It needs presence. Presence is alert without tension. Control is tense without clarity. When control loosens, awareness does not disappear. It becomes sharper. This surprises many people. They expect chaos. They find clarity. Because awareness was always there, obscured by effort. Control creates noise. It fills the mind with commentary, evaluation, and anticipation. When this noise quiets, perception becomes clear. You notice details that were previously missed, subtle sensations, emotional shifts, changes in energy. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is intelligence. A mind that sees clearly does not need to dominate. It responds naturally. This is why letting go of control does not mean acting blindly. It means acting without compulsion. You still notice when something is off. You still adjust when needed. You still make decisions. But these actions arise from observation, not fear. Fear-based control anticipates problems. Awareness-based action responds to them. The difference is timing. Control acts too early or too late. Awareness acts when conditions are present. This timing feels effortless, not because no effort is involved, but because effort is not wasted. Another fear around letting go is the fear of emotional overwhelm. People believe that without control, emotions will take over. But emotional overwhelm is often caused by suppression. Control tries to contain emotion. It labels some feelings as unacceptable. It pushes them away. This resistance causes emotions to intensify. Awareness allows emotion to be felt without interference. When emotion is felt fully, it moves. When it is resisted, it stagnates. Letting go of control does not unleash chaos. It releases flow. Emotion becomes information, not a threat. This allows appropriate response. You do not drown in feeling. You navigate it. The same applies to thought. Control tries to stop thinking. Awareness observes thinking. Observation does not fuel thought. Interference does. When thoughts are allowed to arise and pass, they lose momentum. They no longer demand resolution. The mind settles naturally. This settling is stable, not forced, not fragile. Control produces artificial calm. It requires constant maintenance. Awareness produces organic calm. It sustains itself. This is why peace rooted in awareness endures. It does not depend on vigilance. It depends on honesty. Honesty about what is present. Honesty about what can and cannot be influenced. This honesty removes self-deception. You stop pretending to be in charge of everything. You stop blaming yourself for what you cannot control. This release is deeply relieving. Another misunderstanding is that awareness requires effort. People think they must concentrate intensely. But awareness is simpler than control. It notices without strain. It is already functioning. Even now, you are aware of sounds, of sensations, of thoughts appearing. No effort required. Control interrupts this natural awareness. It pulls attention into strategy and projection. When control fades, attention returns to direct experience. This return feels grounding. You feel more present in your body, more connected to the moment, less scattered. This groundedness supports wise action. You are not lost in thought. You are not frozen by fear. You are here, and from here, action is appropriate. Letting go of control also softens identity. You stop defining yourself by outcomes. You stop measuring worth through success or failure. Awareness does not need validation. It simply witnesses. This witnessing removes the burden of performance. Life is no longer a test. It is an experience. This shift does not remove responsibility. It removes pressure. Responsibility without pressure is sustainable. Pressure without clarity leads to burnout. When awareness replaces control, life becomes simpler. Not easier, simpler. Less internal conflict. Less argument with reality. More direct engagement. Peace arises naturally in this simplicity, not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is being forced. Awareness does not demand certainty. It adapts. This adaptability is the true intelligence of life. When you trust it, control becomes unnecessary. And in its absence, peace remains, quietly, steadily, without effort. Peace does not come from circumstances. One of the most deeply held assumptions is that peace depends on circumstances. People believe that if their environment were calmer, if relationships were stable, if finances were secure, if health were guaranteed, then peace would naturally follow. So life becomes a project of arrangement. Conditions must be adjusted. Situations must be improved. Uncertainty must be reduced. This effort never ends because circumstances are never fixed. Even when one area stabilizes, another shifts. A calm period is followed by disruption. A solution creates new complications. Security reveals new vulnerabilities. If peace depends on circumstances, it must remain temporary. This explains why peace feels fragile for so many people. It appears briefly, then disappears the moment something changes. This fragility is not a failure of peace. It is a misunderstanding of where peace comes from. Peace is not a product of external order. It is a quality of inner relationship. Specifically, the relationship with change. Circumstances are always changing. This is not a problem to solve. It is a fact to understand. When peace is tied to circumstances, resistance is inevitable. Because change threatens peace, the mind becomes defensive. It tries to preserve favorable conditions. It fears disruption. This fear creates tension. Peace is already compromised, even before anything goes wrong. A peaceful mind does not require circumstances to behave. It does not need life to slow down. It does not demand permanence. It understands that change is not an interruption of peace. It is the context in which peace is practiced. This understanding shifts attention inward, not to escape the world, but to see clearly how the mind reacts to it. When something pleasant arises, the mind wants to hold it. When something unpleasant arises, the mind wants to remove it. These reactions are natural, but when they are believed unquestioningly, suffering follows. Because the mind is constantly negotiating with reality. Peace cannot exist in constant negotiation. It exists in acceptance. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means not fighting what is already happening. This non-fighting creates space. In that space, the mind can respond wisely. This response is not delayed by resentment or fear. It is immediate and appropriate. Peace does not require silence. It does not require comfort. It does not require certainty. It requires non-resistance. This is why peace can be present even in difficulty. Not because difficulty is pleasant, but because it is not being opposed. When opposition stops, energy is freed. The body relaxes. The mind clears. Attention becomes steady. This steadiness is peace. It is not emotional numbness. It is not indifference. It is clarity without agitation. People often confuse peace with happiness. Happiness depends on conditions. Peace does not. Happiness comes and goes. Peace remains, not always strong, sometimes subtle, but available. This availability is often overlooked because the mind is trained to look outward. It waits for signs, for improvements, for permission to rest. But peace does not wait. It is present whenever resistance is absent. This is why simple moments often carry unexpected calm, a quiet breath, a pause between thoughts, a moment of stillness. These moments are not special. They are unguarded. The mind is not controlling, not judging, not anticipating. Peace appears naturally. The challenge is not creating peace. It is noticing it, and then not disturbing it with expectation. Once peace is recognized as independent of circumstances, a significant shift occurs. You stop postponing calm. You stop believing life must improve before you can rest. You engage with life fully, without demanding that it guarantee peace. This does not remove challenges. It removes the belief that challenges are obstacles to peace. They are simply experiences. Experiences do not need to be eliminated. They need to be met. When peace is no longer tied to conditions, fear loses its grip. Fear relies on imagined futures. Peace resides in the present. The present is always manageable, not because it is easy, but because it is actual. The mind struggles with imagined problems. It can meet real ones. This distinction matters. It allows peace to coexist with responsibility, with effort, with engagement. You do not withdraw from life. You stop fighting it internally. This internal ceasefire is powerful. It conserves energy. It restores balance. It allows you to move through changing circumstances without being destabilized. Peace does not require life to slow down. It requires the mind to stop demanding control. When this demand fades, peace becomes reliable. Not because circumstances behave, but because the mind no longer depends on them. The moment you stop trying to fix your life, there comes a quiet moment when the mind grows tired of fixing. Not tired in a dramatic way, not defeated, just weary of endless correction. Every problem has been examined, every strategy considered, every angle explored, and still something feels unresolved. This is often misunderstood as failure, but it is not. It is the moment when the habit of control reaches its limit. Fixing is useful when something is clearly broken. But when fixing becomes a way of living, it turns against itself. The mind begins to treat life as a constant malfunction. Something is always wrong. Something always needs adjustment. This perspective creates subtle dissatisfaction. Even when things are relatively stable, the mind searches for improvement. It does not allow life to be as it is. Stopping this impulse does not mean ignoring problems. It means recognizing the difference between responding and obsessing. Obsessing keeps the mind trapped in analysis. Responding keeps the mind connected to reality. The moment you stop trying to fix your life, attention returns to what is actually happening. Not what should be happening. Not what might happen. What is happening? This return is grounding. The mind stops spinning. The body relaxes. A sense of presence emerges. This presence is not an answer. It is a space. Within this space, clarity appears. You begin to see which problems require action and which exist only in thought. Many of the things people try to fix are not problems. They are conditions, impermanence, uncertainty, change. These cannot be fixed. They can only be understood. When the mind stops treating them as errors, suffering decreases. Another aspect of fixing is self-correction. People try to fix themselves. They judge their emotions. They criticize their thoughts. They compare themselves to ideals. This creates internal conflict. The self becomes a project, always incomplete, always insufficient. Stopping this internal fixing does not mean stagnation. It means ending unnecessary self-judgment. Growth without self-rejection becomes possible. You can learn without condemning yourself. You can change without believing you're broken. This shift is deeply freeing. The mind no longer fights itself. Energy is conserved. Attention becomes available for living. The urge to fix also appears in relationships. People try to fix others. They correct. They advise. They manage, often with good intentions. But fixing others creates distance. It prevents genuine connection. When the need to fix relaxes, listening deepens. Understanding replaces strategy. This does not guarantee harmony, but it removes unnecessary tension. Life does not ask to be fixed. It asks to be met. Meeting life directly is uncomfortable at first, because it removes distraction. There is no problem-solving to hide behind. Just experience, just sensation, just awareness. But this discomfort passes. What remains is a quiet steadiness, a sense that nothing essential is wrong. Things may be difficult, but they are not defective. This distinction matters. It changes how challenges are experienced. They become situations to engage with, not flaws to eliminate. The moment you stop trying to fix your life, you stop postponing peace. Peace is no longer dependent on resolution. It exists alongside incompleteness. This is not resignation. It is maturity. Maturity recognizes that life is not a puzzle to solve. It is a process to participate in. Participation requires attention, not domination. When fixing stops, attention returns, and with attention comes responsiveness. You notice what actually needs to be done. You act when action is appropriate. You rest when rest is needed. This natural rhythm replaces forced effort. The mind no longer drives itself relentlessly. It listens. Listening changes everything. You stop living against life. You live with it. This does not remove uncertainty. It removes hostility toward it. Uncertainty becomes part of the landscape, not an enemy. This acceptance softens fear. Fear loses its urgency when it is not constantly triggered by resistance. The mind becomes spacious, not empty. Spacious. There is room for thought, emotion, and action without crowding. This spaciousness is peace, not excitement, not pleasure, but ease. Ease in being. The moment you stop trying to fix your life is not the end of effort. It is the end of unnecessary effort. Effort becomes intelligent, selective, responsive. And in this intelligence, peace remains available, not because life is fixed, but because it no longer needs to be. Living fully in what is. When control loosens and resistance fades, something simple becomes possible. You begin to live in what is, not in a philosophical sense, not as an idea, but as direct experience. For most people, life is rarely lived where it actually happens. The body is here, but the mind is elsewhere, replaying the past, planning the future, evaluating the present. This constant movement creates distance. Distance from sensation. Distance from emotion. Distance from reality. Living fully in what is does not mean freezing time. It means allowing attention to rest where experience is unfolding. This resting is not passive. It is alert. You notice the breath as it moves, the body as it shifts, thoughts as they arise and pass. Nothing is forced. Nothing is suppressed. Life is experienced directly, without commentary. This directness feels unfamiliar at first. The mind is used to interpreting, judging, and predicting. Without these habits, it feels exposed. But this exposure is not danger. It is intimacy with experience. When attention rests in what is, clarity increases. You see situations more accurately. You sense when to act and when to wait. You feel when something is complete. This sensitivity is lost when the mind is busy controlling. Control overlays experience with intention. Presence reveals experience as it is. This difference matters. It changes how decisions are made. Decisions are no longer rushed. They are informed by the whole situation, not by fear. Living in what is also changes how time is felt. The present moment becomes sufficient. Not exciting, not special, sufficient. There is no urgency to escape it. No need to hurry it along. This sufficiency is deeply calming. The mind no longer treats time as something to manage. It experiences time as movement, movement without pressure. This removes a significant source of stress. Many people feel rushed even when nothing is demanding their attention. This rush comes from the mind's refusal to settle. When attention stays with what is, the rush dissolves. You are where you are, doing what you are doing. Nothing else is required. Living fully in what is does not mean ignoring memory or planning. It means not being dominated by them. Memory becomes a reference, not a prison. Planning becomes a tool, not a fixation. Attention remains grounded in the present. This grounding stabilizes the mind. Emotions are felt more clearly. Without resistance, they move naturally. Joy is allowed without clinging. Sadness is allowed without collapse. Both pass. The mind does not interfere. This non-interference is not indifference. It is respect for the nature of experience. Experience moves. The mind does not need to push it. Living in what is also softens identity. You stop defining yourself by narratives. You're not constantly telling a story about who you are and where you're going. You are simply here, responding. This simplicity is powerful. It removes unnecessary self-concern. Attention turns outward and inward naturally. You become more available, more attentive, more responsive. Relationships change in this space. You listen without preparing responses. You speak without rehearsing outcomes. Connection deepens, not because you try to connect, but because nothing is blocking connection. Living in what is does not guarantee comfort. There may still be discomfort. There may still be uncertainty. But discomfort is experienced as sensation, not as threat. Uncertainty is experienced as openness, not as danger. This shift reduces fear. Fear feeds on imagined futures. Presence starves it. When attention is here, fear has less ground, not because it is eliminated, but because it is seen. Seen fear loses its authority. It becomes one experience among many, not the driver. The more consistently attention rests in what is, the more natural peace becomes. Peace is no longer an event. It is a background condition. It does not require maintenance. It arises from non-interference. This peace is resilient. It does not collapse under pressure. It does not depend on silence. It does not require ideal conditions. It is present in activity, in conversation, in movement, because it is not created. It is uncovered. Living fully in what is does not mean life becomes small. It becomes complete. Each moment stands on its own, not as a means to an end, but as an experience in itself. This completeness ends the search, not because everything is resolved, but because nothing is being postponed. Life is no longer something you're trying to get through. It is something you are participating in, fully, directly, without control, without resistance. And in this participation, peace is no longer distant. It is simply here. When there is nothing left to hold, there is a quiet point where the need to hold finally loosens. Not because something was achieved, not because life became simple, but because holding itself was seen clearly, seen as effort, seen as tension, seen as unnecessary. At this point, the mind no longer tries to secure peace. It no longer asks life for guarantees. It no longer believes that control is protection. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no breakthrough moment, just a subtle release, a sense that nothing needs to be held together. This does not mean life becomes empty. It means it becomes unburdened. When there is nothing left to hold, attention becomes spacious. Thoughts arise and pass without being captured. Emotions move without being suppressed or exaggerated. Situations unfold without immediate judgment. Life continues exactly as before, but the relationship to it has changed. There is no longer an inner grip. This grip was never visible until it relaxed. Only then does its absence become noticeable. The body feels lighter, not euphoric, just less tense. The mind feels quieter, not silent, just less demanding. This quietness is not produced. It is revealed. Revealed when effort ends. Holding was never strength. It was habit. A habit formed from fear, from the belief that letting go would lead to collapse. But collapse does not occur. What collapses is the illusion of control. And in its place, something steadier appears. Trust. Not trust in outcomes. Not trust in plans. Trust in awareness itself. The recognition that whatever arises can be met, not managed. Met. This trust is calm. It does not seek reassurance. It does not require proof. It is present because awareness is present. When there is nothing left to hold, resistance disappears. Without resistance, suffering has no ground. Pain may still appear. Loss may still occur. Change will still happen. But suffering, created by opposition, fades. Life is no longer something to conquer. It is something to experience, moment by moment, without agenda, without demand. This does not make life passive. It makes it intimate. You're no longer standing against experience. You are inside it, fully. When nothing is held, nothing is lost. Because nothing was owned, everything was always passing through. This understanding brings humility, not weakness. Humility in recognizing that life does not belong to anyone. It moves according to conditions. Fighting those conditions was never strength. Seeing them clearly is. When there is nothing left to hold, peace is no longer a goal. It is a background, not always noticeable, but always available. It does not need protection. It does not disappear when challenged. It does not depend on success or failure. It remains because nothing is pushing against what is. This is not the end of effort. It is the end of struggle. Action continues. Decisions are made. Responsibilities are met. But without the burden of control, without the fear of losing peace, because peace is no longer something to lose. It was never possessed, only obscured. When the hand opens, it is already there. This is the quiet conclusion. Not an answer, not a solution, just a simple recognition. Peace comes when you stop trying to control life, not because life finally behaves, but because nothing needs to be held anymore. And in that openness, life is allowed to move, freely, naturally, as it always has.